You're listening to About You here on the Source FM. Jeanette and I are chatting away like mad and the music's disappearing off in the background. We had a little bit of a problem with that CD player at the beginning of the track, so apologies for that. Jeanette, we've been having very interesting conversations about you and your childhood. Mm-hmm. It's certainly a tough time for you in that pub, wasn't it? It
was indeed. I was abused by the whole family, in fact, and in all the ways that were imaginable: sexual, physical, emotional abuse. It was only years later that I found out that particularly my grandmother had had the most awful upbringing, and I think that's where the abuse came from. She hated me from the minute I was born, and it was a lot to do with her insecurity and her need to be loved. And I could, on reflection as an adult, I could understand that, but as a child, of course, I couldn't. And it had devastating effect on my self-esteem and my development and my choice of partners in my early life and so on. And it was a very, very difficult time.
Did you kind of rebel against it in a way, or did you withdraw with it? Did you?
I think I rebelled. I think I was, was quite a strong person, I think, in one way. So I would run away from school. I mean, it's like my husband every so often to say, "Do you not know where such and such a place is?" And I'll say, "Well, actually, I don't think I was at school that day when they were talking about wherever it is," because I often wasn't. If I couldn't settle, I would just disappear, and people didn't seem to know that I wasn't there.
So did you have trouble because of all the problems sort of associating with other people and making friends and peers and that sort of thing?
I think the friendship bit was okay at school, and I was a very sporty person. And there's something about being interested in loving sports, and if you happen to be good at it, it means that I think it attracts people that have got a like mind and will like to be with you. So I don't think I particularly lacked friends as a result of it, although I didn't have particularly deep and meaningful relationships growing up.
I suppose it was a difficult thing to talk about. A lot of people talk about their home lives, but that must have been quite private.
Absolutely. I'd go to school on a Monday and dread when they were talking about, they'd have an opportunity to say, well, we did this at the weekend or we did that. And of course, there began my life of fantasy, because I would make up all sorts of things and say, we've been on an outing to whatever and wherever, and of course we hadn't been anywhere, but it was a way of covering up, really. It was protecting, because it was anxious. I did have anxious times about it all.
Yeah. And so you moved on through junior school, then you went to senior school. Well, mostly went to senior school from what you're saying.
Yeah, most days I was there.
Did you miss quite a bit, really?
Yeah, I think I did. Curiously, there was one teacher in particular who was really supportive of me. I loved English, and his passion was English as well, and he really, really took me under his wing and gave me an interest and supported the things that I loved and so on. And he gave me the confidence to go on. He wanted to put me in my O-levels early for, English and so on, to get me settled, and he recommended me to be head girl of the school, and I ended up being the head girl at the school. And so there was huge support for me from some people. They could see the troubled me underneath, but recognised, I think, that there was somebody who could maybe move on from that with a bit of help and encouragement.
So were you still in the troubled home environment whilst you were head girl, or had you moved on there?
No, I was still there.
So that must have been a very kind of odd life to live, because you're going from this kind of elated position and everyone looking up to you, back to the secret life.
Yeah.
How did you cope with all that?
Well, I don't know. I think what you do is what's normal for you when you're a child. I had nothing else to compare what was happening to me with anybody else. I certainly didn't think that other people were being abused as I was. And as in common with, I think, everybody who's abused, they think it's their own fault. I thought I really was an awful person, and that, there must have been something bad about me. And it wasn't long before I realised I had to get out of the home. That was an absolute certainty. And I actually, I didn't really know where I was going in terms of my future, but I decided to go into nursing, and by doing went to live in the nursing home and to get away from home altogether. And I remember back now that I would make special requests to the nursing home sister to say, please, can I stay for my holidays? I can't go back home for my holidays. And they didn't like it. They thought, you should go back and socialise with your lovely, warm, loving family. Not, and of course I could never say.
You couldn't explain the reason.
No, I would never.
Nobody picked up on it. I mean, some people might have sort of recognised the symptoms, would they?
I don't think they were geared up to thinking about abuse in those days. I don't think they expected it. And I think they had, I know, because when I went into social work, I remember when first some of my early training was around, go for the des reses, stop focusing on the people who are in the you know, in the working class backgrounds, they're not the ones that are doing all the abuse. There might be rough edges, but they're not necessarily abusers just because they come from poor homes, which of course I now know is absolutely true. Of course they're not. But I do know there's a lot more devious work goes on in a more middle class environment. And of course, you know, I was so well aware of that. But I don't think people then, when I was younger, were necessarily aware of what was going on.
They kind of feel it's not going to happen because of perhaps the class thing or whatever, don't they?
Whatever it was, it's hard to know, isn't it? And I was so good at not acknowledging that there was a problem. If somebody had said to me, "Are you being abused at home?" I would have said no.
No, of course not.
Because there was a protection, you know. And it was years before I actually it was many years later that I actually came to accept that that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
A wonderful colleague that I was working with, and this was in my mid-30s, before I started to think about my past, you know, was just say, it was a response to a child that had happened who'd been abused that I was dealing with. And he just said, I wonder if you've ever, you know, had a chance to think about, you know, your past and what might have happened. And bless his heart, he transformed my life. He started me on a journey, and you know, I began to look and do some work, and all I can remember was this lovely guy who's still a great friend. Actually, he said something to me and I was on my knees. I couldn't get up off the floor again. And he physically got me to some counselling, and I mean, I could cry about it now because it was life transforming. He gave me my life back by helping me to look back and deal with it and come forward. And I think one of the things I'm now so aware it shaped my future. I went into nursing first of all for perhaps not the right reasons, but it was a good life, and it was a life that suited me. And then went into social work, and I actually know that I was a good social worker because I could understand, I could empathise. I understood why a kid was on the roof and being an absolute little so-and-so. I wouldn't know why, you know, because I had exactly the same feelings myself, you know.
There's so much life experience can teach you, isn't there?
For sure.
I tell you what, I'd love to hear more about this. Let's catch your next record first, though. What are we going to listen to? We're
going to listen to Les Miserables, and a track that's got a heart full of love, and hopefully, do you hear the people sing if it all comes up in one?
There's a grief that can't be spoken. There's a pain goes on and on. Empty chairs at empty tables. Now my friends are dead and gone. Here they talked of revolution.
You're listening to The Source on 96.1. You're on the About You show, and that fabulous choice of music was from my special guest, Jeanette Preston, who's the organiser, founder and the brains behind Pants, which is the very, very good movement that you've started. Lovely piece of music. It's made you look rather sad. I need to cheer you up. I'm bringing back too many memories, aren't I?
Well, I think Les Mis is such a powerful and emotional piece of music, and the empty chairs and empty tables, all those young men that were lost to a cause, I think you can't help but feel a bit sad at realising what people... I think it kind of encapsulates for me what people do suffer in their lives, and the empty chairs and empty tables, and it brings me back to Pants and to the actual reality that a lot of homes will have empty chairs and tables in them because they've lost people to Pants area cancers, and there's a great sadness, and people never get over losing their mother, their auntie, their daughter, their sister, their brother, their uncle. It's an individual person each time that's dying from cancer, and it's not about statistics and things that you can brush over and look at unemotionally. It's real people.
And of course, we're going on in your life towards nursing and stuff. So you've actually, obviously, been through it, but you must have sort of been getting aware in the sort of terms of your job of things like that by being in the nursing environment.
Absolutely. I think I just feel that everything in my life has kind of directed me to this point in a really powerful way.
I was getting that.
Oh.
No, it certainly seems like your life is very, you're almost destined to do this, weren't you?
It honestly feels like that. It sometimes amazes me, the stuff that goes on, and the power that I get to do what I'm doing is quite phenomenal. And I'm always surprised, one, at my energy level, and other people are as well. I never stop. and two, the fact that, you know, the whole background of the nursing, the social work, have given me the range of skills, the teaching and so on, to talk to groups, to talk to people, to motivate people, to encourage groups of people who are volunteering for PANTS, who maybe don't get on with each other, that might need a little bit of conflict resolution at intervals and that kind of thing. I'm in a management role in a sense with PANTS, which is something that in my working life I shied away from, because it wasn't something that interested me, but I now find I'm in that position. But I just think, well, actually I do have the skills. The things that I've been doing in my life have led me to this point.
Head girl, that must have made a contribution.
I guess, yeah.
So you were head girl of the school and now you're head girl of PANTS.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess I hadn't thought of it like that, but I guess that's absolutely right.
So you moved on from nursing, and nursing was somewhat of an avoidance of your upbringing to an extent, but obviously you were quite passionate about being a nurse.
Yes.
And then you transformed into social work. What made you make that sort of switch?
Well, it was just very simple, actually. I was working nights nursing when the children were small, and a job came up locally to where I lived at St Agnes at that time, in an old people's home, and it was actually a council-run home. And I got to know the people who were running it, and they asked, would I like to go and do a night there? And one thing led to another, and eventually they seconded me to go and do my social work training via, you know, Cornwall County Council. So it wasn't a choice thing. I think to actually go in and be a social worker out of choice does show a little bit of bravery, beyond which, you know, I hadn't that.
I've just realised we've just skipped over an enormous part of your life, because you were a 16-year-old living in a pub, moving into nursing, and now you're a married woman with children living in St Agnes. Where did I miss?
Yeah, well,
there's a bit there where you need to hear about.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the nursing took up, you know, obviously the main thrust of my time. I got married when I was 70. In 1970, I was 63 now, sorry. I married in 1970 to my first husband, and you know, he was a good man in so many ways, but unfortunately had a drink problem, and I didn't recognise that, because growing up in a pub, I think, you know, people were drinking all around me. It was normal behaviour, and for a long time I just coped with it. But of course, what happened was, having had counselling and began to look at my life and to see how things were affecting me, made me realise that there was a lot of harm going on in the home, and you know, that it wasn't good for my children. But I waited until they were grown up before moving out, but I knew that at some point that I had to get out of that.
This was all in sort of the Berkshire area, was it all done that way?
It was Berkshire where it started. I was first married, but we moved down when the children were small, and that was really, for me, quite a monumental thing and quite an interesting thing that I hadn't recognised at the time. But years later, when I was thinking about it, I was running from my family, protecting my two young daughters, so that they didn't go through the same thing that I went through. But I didn't realise that at the time. I just knew I wanted to get away with them.
And why Cornwall? What made you choose Cornwall?
Well, what could be more lovely? There was, you know, how can you say what brings you to such an amazing place?
Because obviously we're here now, we know how lovely it is, and we don't want to go. But when you're sort of up there, what made you look this way?
I don't know.
Rather than Scotland? Or
yeah,
somewhere.
well, I don't know. It's interesting, isn't it, what brings us to different places? I mean, certainly we didn't have a job to come to, or my husband didn't, but I knew that I'd get nursing or other work. I knew that my role would not be a particular problem, and it wasn't. I don't know what drives those kinds of things, and I think that's quite interesting, but I certainly knew when I was at St Agnes that I felt very much that I wanted to be there.
And suddenly you were now getting a life that actually was meaningful for you, and you were actually enjoying and happy with.
Very happy.
That must have been quite a feeling.
It was an amazing feeling, to be absolutely honest. I was very happy with my first husband. He was a good man, as I said, in many, many ways, and we did have some fun times. But when my daughters were born, my life was transformed. I actually, for the first time, really knew what love was all about. I love them so much, as I still do. I mean, they're the joy of my life, even though they're much, much older now.
Are they
not
quite
babies.
close you're talking as if they're very close in age. Were they quite
close?
Well,
no, there are 3 years and 8 months between the two. You know, but they are very, very close, but they hated each other when they were children.
Oh, no.
I mean, hated each other.
A lot of children do that, don't they?
Oh, their behaviour towards each other was horrendous, because they couldn't be more different. You know, I think that was it with chalk and cheese, but they are so close now, and I'm so glad of that. So glad.
Fantastic. Right, we're going to move on to your next record. Your story is so interesting. I don't think we're going to get all 6 of your records in, so let's have a listen to the next one.
Absolutely. This is Ave Verum Corpus by Mozart, the next one. And this encapsulates my religious beliefs. I'd walked away from religion all my young life because I really felt I didn't deserve it. It took a long time to make a journey back, but music was instrumental in making that happen.